Yo, what's up guys? You got pokeaim here with another Pokemon Sword and Shield news video, I guess. I don't know what they call these. But we're going to be talking about Hawlucha. Hawlucha has actually just been banned from the UU tier, and I want to talk a little bit about it. It's actually the first BL Night. For those that don't know what the BL Nights are, basically it's a series that Blunder and I do that we take all the BL Pokemon throughout, many different tiers, and we ladder with them in the tier above or just OU in general, and that'll be coming a couple months. We need a few more besides Hawlucha before we can get there, but I'll be talking a little bit about the Hawlucha ban, my thoughts on it, and my thoughts on UU banning as a whole, because I think this is a little bit different than the Darmanitan ban, and I'll explain why as we go forward. But Hawlucha recently found itself in the UU tier after dropping off in usage in OU. Right, so it fell down to UU, and keep in mind, UU already has some massive threats, right? It has Obstagoon, it has Gengar, some would even say it has Weavile. I'm like on the fence about Weavile specifically. I don't think it's that crazy, but that's just me, personally. And of course, before Hawlucha was there, we had Como, right? So you were already having to deal with Como, Obstagoon, and Gengar, but now we traded Como because Como rose up to usage in OU, and Lucha fell back down. So let's talk about a few of the Hawlucha sets. I think one of the biggest things about Hawlucha is the fact that unburden makes it very, very hard to revenge kill, right? And I'm also saying this stuff because currently they haven't posted the thread where they talk about why the Hawlucha was banned, but I'm actually part of the UU Council, so I had a little bit of a vote in that. And again, in my Darmanitan ban, I talked about how I don't like quick ban specifically, but it's different for UU. And you know what? We'll get into that real quick before we actually get into Hawlucha and why I was banned. The reason it's different for UU is because the way UU works with quick bans is they ban a Pokemon, but they test that Pokemon back in later, right? They almost always test the Pokemon back in later. And this works in a sense because, for example, Hawlucha might be broken right now just because Obstagoon and Gengar are running around. So you have to pile on answers to all three of those Pokemon, but maybe in a metagame where Gengar and Obstagoon don't exist in the UU tier, Hawlucha might not be broken, and therefore UU will test it back in. And I'm a big fan of that method, right? I don't like quick bans where we'll never be able to use the Pokemon again. Obviously, one of the main things I said in the Darmanitan video is I'm not a big fan of getting rid of this thing without having the community really have a say. And I feel like that's the same for Hawlucha because we don't really know what Hawlucha meta is like, right? And again, before the Hawlucha meta, it was literally Gengar, Como, and Obstagoon, and all three were in talks of being suspected or banned, but then OU took Como because it's based on usage, and then Hawlucha was just thrown back in. It's only been a couple days, and it's already being quick banned, excuse me. So my talks with the council was like, hey, well, we don't know necessarily how broken this Pokemon is just because we're dealing with everything. And, objectively speaking, Hawlucha is definitely a scarier Pokemon for UU, and we'll get into that in a bit too. But I just wanted to make that clear that the reason I'm okay with things like this, and this is just my personal opinion, is because I know that Hawlucha will be suspect tested back in later in maybe a more cleaner metagame where potentially Gengar and Obstagoon are also banned / quick banned / suspected out, and then we'll see how it is, right? Like maybe a Pokemon like Vaporeon is a great answer to Hawlucha, but it's not able to be used as much because it has to deal with the physical threat of Obstagoon as well, and the onslaught of like Nasty Plot Gengar, so it's a little bit outclassed at the moment, right? But yeah, that's just my thoughts overall on bans and UU, and I like that UU is open to doing things like that. I really wish that OU would do stuff like that. I don't think they've done stuff like that in a long time. Like, they've dropped stuff in the beginning of generations to test things out. Like, we have Aegislash tested back in, but when that manga is banned, it's banned for good, right? I think the last time they actually suspect tested something in that was already banned was maybe like Kyurem Black in Gen 5, which was allowed to stay in OU throughout the generations, though obviously now it's not released, but when it does get released, it has Dragon Dance and Physical Ice Stab, so we doubt it'll stay. But yeah, then that's probably not accurate too, because they've tested in things like Excadrill, and obviously Pokemon have come down as well, but they've never, I feel, during the middle of a generation, especially when a generation gets like static, or I don't want to say stale, but the metagame is necessarily healthy. They've never thought about, like, I feel like they've never shaken it up a little bit. And maybe that's not the right thing to do, right? Because obviously I said the metagame is healthy, so why would you want to shake it up? But I mean, that's just my personal opinion on things like that, and that's why I'm okay. And that's why I even mentioned in the Darmanitan video that I'm okay with the way UU bans things, because they're going to be allowing them back at different points. But let's talk about Hawlucha, alright? So, I think the biggest thing about Hawlucha is the fact that it's incredibly hard to revenge kill, and you don't know which set it's specifically running. By that I mean, you know it's running Flying Stab, you know it's running Fighting Stab, but you don't know if it's going to be Unburden, unless you see it with Pincurchin or Indeedee, or maybe Wheezing, depending if you're into that Misty Seed stuff. But if you want to make your Wheezing, I think, worse in UU. I think Levitate is one of the best Wheezings in UU personally. But you don't necessarily know if it's running the White Herb close combat set, and basically this set specifically I think has to run speed, because you have to run Throat Chop, right? The Blade is one of the best answers to Hawlucha, and even then it's with a spike up, it's 2-hit KO'd by +2 Throat Chop, and it fails to KO Hawlucha back. But yeah, close combat acrobatics, Throat Chop, or Swords Dance. I guess Brave Bird is also an option over acrobatics as well. And then you have the potential of an Electric Seed set, which actually gets to run a bulkier variant because it doesn't have to rely on its own attacks to activate its Unburden, right? So this one can afford to be slower than Obstagoon, can afford to be slower than Gengar, you know, 2 premier threats in the UU tier, just because the way it gets its defense boost or its Unburden activated is from a partner like Pincurchin. That can even Memento as well into Hawlucha, getting the Electric Seed and also giving it that defense boost too. And that defense boost is pretty big because it makes Banded Mamoswine do like half or even less than half with Ice Shard, Weavile around the same regard. So this one specifically operates when the Blade is severely weakened or gone, but it's also just a great cleanup versus offensive teams. And sorry about that, just smacked my mic. And then, of course, you have the potential Power Herb Sky Attack set. So I think that's a big thing as well, like not really knowing what type of Lucha it'll be. Like maybe you go out to your Ghost type, like Gengar, to block the White Herb close combat and to stop the, you know, you'll live in acrobatics because it's not boosted, right? It's 55 base power versus the 110 it becomes after an item is gone, and then you get bopped by a Power Herb Sky Attack. So from there, like, I definitely think that there is that factor with it. Obviously, I'm more towards this set and this set specifically, though I swap up Taunt with Throat Chop. I think they're interchangeable. Taunt just allows you to beat like Pokemon like Pikamuku, who are not running counter and unaware Pokemon in general, as long as you don't get burnt. For instance, but I want to read a few posts that we have here from some Premier UU players as well. You have Molte, excuse me, who says Twilight made a great post explaining why. I'll read that later, but why Hawlucha is another healthy tool in the metagame. But once Unburden is activated, it's really tough to revenge kill. It's able to outspeed everything in the tier, which limits the ways to revenge kill it. Obviously, the first thing which comes to mind is obviously Ice Shard, which is a super effective priority on Hawlucha, and I just touched upon that before, but he says like Life or Mamoswine, 81 to 95%. That's the 0 HP Hawlucha, so that's to the one that doesn't have any damage on it or doesn't have any HP boost either, which is, you know, it's possible. UU, well, I'll talk about hazard control in UU later in a later video, but it's definitely possible. And then Choice Band Weavile does 79 to 93%, and we're talking about the least bulky Hawlucha. Exactly. Thanks to Unburden, Hawlucha can afford to rerun invested in HP. Of course, the Electric Seed and Psychic Seed variants, I already mentioned that. Pincurchin, Indeedee as partners, and it doesn't have a lot of defensive answers as well. It can choose its 4th slot, and that's a big thing since it only really needs Swords Dance, Close Combat, and Brave Bird / Acrobatics. Taunt is really good for shutting down defensive teams. Throat Chop is there. I'm paraphrasing a lot, but I'm reading it at the same time. Throat Chop is there to punish the Blade. At +2, it is almost a 2-hit KO on the Blade, but with Spike Up it is, and the Blade doesn't actually KO it back. It's a low-risk, high-reward Pokemon, which impacts in a bad way in the current tier, and the fact that it can overpower with such ease defensive staples thanks to its powerful stat plus Swords Dance while being so hard to revenge kill makes it too hard to play around. And I can respect that. I definitely can respect that opinion. And again, I do think that a lot of that has to do with also the fact that you have to deal with massive threats like Gengar and Obstagoon in the tier, which is why, once again, I'm a big fan of how UU does their testing. If they end up banning, well, Lucha is banned. I already know the thread isn't up, but this video will go up at 6 p.m. It's like 2 p.m. when I'm recording it, but I'm part of the UU account, so I already know it's banned. Amain also says they'll be talking from Hawlucha from a subjective standpoint, but they have their bulkier set here with close combat, acrobatics, Swords Dance, Taunt, and Throat Chop. 52 speed, allows to outspeed base 80 Pokemon like Mamoswine and Gardevoir prior to having unburden boost. I think Mamoswine is obviously a big one. You don't want to lose size to a crash, though. Always almost click Ice Shard. Though you can obviously change up your sets to outspeed Obstagoon. Hawlucha won a ton of games without trouble. It's a great partner to the biggest threats in the metagame like the Blade, Gengar, and Obstagoon, which further increases its potential in the metagame. Exactly. They all pair well together because they break through what it doesn't like, right? Lucha breaks through Pokemon like Umbreon, which Gengar doesn't particularly like, whereas Obstagoon and Gengar can break through the Blade, which Lucha doesn't typically like as well. This close to ban warrior in the metagame. This would be in my system the closest thing to ban warrior in the metagame. So they basically feel that Hawlucha is the closest to be ban warrior. And they actually have a few replays here, which we'll watch. So they're in the 1600s in the ladder. Well, right here it's 1500, but in the other one they're in the 1600s in the ladder. I like how they switch up the chancing in the 1600s, but we'll watch this metagame first. This is about this is around the mid ladder. We'll watch this game first. But as you can see, very easy type of Lucha build. To be honest though, that's kind of just exploiting their team composition. They don't have anything for a +2 Lucha at all, and it's very easy to get +2 Lucha here, especially with the Electric Seed giving it the defense. But you'll see real quick that, you know, Pincurchin is led, and they click Spikes, alright? Well, the opponent makes the smart Espeon play and gets the Magic Bounce back, but all they have to do is force out Espeon in this game. That's... God, that killed. All they have to do, that's Specs, obviously. All they have to do is force out Espeon in this game, get in right period right now, and that's it. That's it. Lucha comes out and wins. That's literally how this game goes. Now, granted, that's taking advantage of what I think would be kind of a poor team composition, but at the same time, their type of team does deal with threats like Obstagoon. Their type of team does deal with threats like Gengar and the Blade, but it just can't deal with Lucha in itself. And again, that goes back to a poor team composition as well, but it's not their fault because when you have to deal with all these threats, it's almost impossible to deal with them defensively. I myself, who also loves to run balance in UU, where balance is arguably one of the worst playstyles considering how good offense is and how good hard stall are, balance is actually just weaker toward those offensive mons because a lot of offensive teams run, you know, breakers, right? And as you can see, Hawlucha was very easily able to win that game. And, you know, we go to this one here where the opponent has Weezing, which is a really nice check. They have Jellicent, which can Will-O-Wisp and shunts that back and probably eat a hit. And Colossal, which can burn it and even potentially intimidate. Let's look at this replay real quick as well. I actually haven't seen this one in particular, but we see Mamoswine versus Weezing lead. Hard Gengar, that's a great switch into Weezing unless they're running like some random Shadow Ball or Dark Pulse. And you can see that Gengar comes in and immediately is going to threaten Colossal with the trick. And this is actually pretty big too because, again, I don't know how this replay goes, but you're putting Colossal in a position where if it clicks rocks, Hawlucha can set up. Obviously, that's not how it's going to go, but you're also limiting its spin capabilities too because it can't, you know, make the wrong spin play, and the wrong spin play would be going for spin as Gengar comes in, but then threaten Gengar with Rock Blast or Stone Edge respectively. So we actually see a Focus Blast come out there as a Flare Blitz immediately comes out. So Gengar is gone. But this will invite in Mamoswine to potentially click Stealth Rock there, and that's smart too because you're getting that guaranteed chip on Weezing for an Hawlucha endgame. And Weezing comes out too, so we might even see an Icicle Crash come out or even Hard Obstagoon on the Will-O-Wisp, which is a very aggressive play. The Horizon person actually predicts that very nicely too. But as you can see, they can't let their Lucha get weakened. Period. They can't let their Lucha answer get weakened. Period. Right here. But they end up letting Jellicent come in, which is basically the exact same thing. And I love how they're pivoting around this Obstagoon. I love how they're pivoting around this Obstagoon, keeping Scrafty there. No, Scrafty just died, so they can't even bring it back in to get the Intimidate off on Lucha itself. And right here, Dragon Dance doesn't really make much sense because, you know, you'll get Revenge Kill by Lucha as well. But this is the situation where you can either bring out Pincurchin or you can go the Blade and do the thing. I'm watching this game because I want to see how this ends up going. But as you can see right there, okay, that was the situation they were waiting for. They sack Pincurchin to the close combat. They potentially Memento here, or as they go Frostmoth. They went Frostmoth because that would either give them setup opportunities, but also deal with Lucha, or so they thought, because Memento comes out and they're able to Swords Dance in their face. And basically the way this works in this game, because it's looking like it, the way this works is it's gonna lead to either Lucha dealing with Weezing, or Lucha leaving Weezing to the point where Obstagoon gets to come out and get 2 kills with plus the Blade. So I don't even know if Lucha's gonna end up killing this Weezing, depending on it. 82% of the lot. God, Weezing just dies. That's it. So that's it. That's a wrap. Sir Fetch can't knock it out with first impression. Jellicent dies too. So I thought more damage was necessary on their Weezing, so I don't know what type of Weezing that was specifically, but as you can see, first impression does crap, and it just dies. But at least it gets to show how easy it is to set up with Lucha, whereas even if you're, I mean, that was still well played. And I think the opponent played it well too, don't get me wrong. I don't think the opponent made the doubles necessary, right, to prevent Lucha from sweeping, but I guess 82% was enough for Weezing to do that. And then we have a post from Adam. And he basically repeats what I said. Balance/bulky teams are awful right now, and I agree with that, though I specifically love to use balance in UU. It's not hard to see why. Again, the incredible offensive presence that a lot of UU has as well. But let's go around the Lucha. Here's what I PM Hog in my vote, because Adam's also part of the UU Council. Its coverage is unwallable, as even the blade takes almost half from +2 throw chop. A defensive boost through seeds easily stops a very limiting counterplay to Ice Shard into blade, and it's impossible to stop it from achieving unburden boost too, especially since you never know if it's Sky Attack or White Herb until it reveals it, right? Unless you see, you know, Pincurchin on the team itself. But overall, I can understand personally, and maybe you can too, how Hawlucha is definitely at least has a strong presence in the metagame in itself, and again, a game where there are Pokemon like Obstagoon and Gengar. Like I said, who knows? Maybe defensive Arcanine, you know, could deal with Hawlucha, but it's not as good right now because it has to deal with letting Gengar setting up a nasty plot or getting knocked off by Obstagoon, so it has to deal with the heavy-duty boots from there. So I do think the current metagame does at least show that it's easy enough to win with Lucha, and therefore maybe that makes it unhealthy for the metagame itself, right? But as I've been mentioning the entire time, a lot of that goes back to the fact that we just have too many threats right now in UU in itself. And Hawlucha is the first ban of the UU tier, and it is the first BL night. So I don't think it will be the last BL night at all as UU goes through it. UU's still in beta right now, so they have plenty of time until the tier is actually like a stable tier of sorts. But I am hopeful that we will see Hawlucha later again, at least properly suspect tested in. And the way that would work is, let's say, you know, let's just throw it out there. Let's say Obstagoon and Gengar get banned. Let's just say they do. I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they won't. I don't know anything about it. I might be on the council, but I just give my opinion and talk. That's it. That's all I do. If they do get banned, and let's say Hawlucha gets suspect tested in. Hawlucha would get suspect tested in for maybe a week or two. Maybe a week and a half. Maybe a week. Yeah. Around that time. A week or two, whatever. And then during that time, the community itself, which is, I think, such a huge part, right? Like, a lot of the times bans are made for the tournament community, and I don't like that. I don't specifically like that. I'm part of the tournament community too, but the tournament community is just a small part of the community. Even though it's, you know, Smogon is there to make, they want to make the most stable metagame and things like that. The tournament community is still not the biggest part of the community, right? And we mentioned this in our Darmanitan video, where, I'm sorry, like stumbling on words, my bad. We mentioned this in our we mentioned this in the last video about the ice Pokemon getting banned, that you do need to evolve community in it, whether it be via talking, which as you can see, UU has done that with their talking, but it's only been a few days, and also with suspect testing. The way it would work is for that week or two, it would be allowed on the ladder, and you'd be able to play the games, and then you'd have the feedback, you would get requirements or recs, and that would involve, like, you know, X amount of games and X amount of wins, or GXC rather. But GXC is, you know, going to be determined based on your wins and stuff. And that would provide you the, you know, the recs to vote, and then it would be put to the community vote based on the people who actually laddered and whatnot, and then it would be properly banned or unbanned. And I think that's the correct way to do things. But I also agree that, much like, you know, things like this have been happening for a long time, right? We'll go back to DVP, the little history lesson for you guys. DVP OU, or 4th Gen OU, one of my favorite metagames of all time. Latias and Salamence were banned around the same time, at the same time, right? But you fast forward to 2019, or 2018, 2019, Latias, we're obviously in 2020, I know, I'm just thinking, but Latias actually got suspect tested back in a DVP because the tournament community, actually specifically because of the tournament community, we're mentioning and things like that, where Latias might not have been broken itself, but just because it was there next to Salamence, it was just too much to handle. And then, you know, fast forward to now, Latias is now allowed in Gen 4 OU and played in tournaments regularly, and it's not even like the biggest threat, which is crazy, right? A Pokemon that had been banned for going on 6-7 years ends up coming back, 7 years, 8 years, whatever, ends up coming back and not being as crazy as people would have thought. And that also has to do with the metagame adapting over the years too. Even an unplayed even if a metagame isn't played as the main one, it's still, you know, metagames change and develop over time. So we might see something like that with Lucha. I don't know. Who knows? But the important thing is that we have the ability to actually try that and see for ourselves. But anyway, guys, that's all I have to say about the Hawlucha ban. Let me know your thoughts. I'm actually personally excited that we have, you know, BL Nights coming up, because obviously that's a series that me and Blunder love, and we're super excited to do things like that going forward. I know you like, for the people who actually watched it, I know y'all love the energy as well. You get to see a more hype side of me that you might not always see unless I'm with my friends, but I don't know, Blunder my brother, so it's something like that's that bond between, whatever, we don't got going into that stuff. I hope you guys, you know, are able to at least hear what I'm saying. That's the thing, but you don't have to agree with me at all. That's not, you're not sheep. I don't say something, you listen, you know, or well, unlisten as well, but whatever the term is, whatever it is, have your own opinions. Let me know them down below as well, and let me know your thoughts as well on Obstagoon and Gengar. I'm actually pretty curious to see. I know that the majority of people also find them a little bit overwhelming in UU, but yeah, I do want to know your thoughts. Let me know them down below, and yeah, goodbye, my friends.